With the release of the new Tough Brick update, the Pyro got a list of changes. The Air Blast was nerfed and buffed, and 3 of his flamethrowers were changed around, and people in particular were pretty upset about the changes in the degreaser. But let's take a step back and think about why the changes were made, and how this actually affects Pyro overall in the game. So if we look at before the update, we see that a lot of people are already complaining about the degreaser. In particular, if you've watched Benny's rant on Pyros, you see that he has argued that the degreaser is basically a straight upgrade from the default flamethrower, because the downsides of it doesn't really matter when the whole metagame of the Pyro is based on air blasts, rather than dealing damage with the flames itself. So essentially, the way the Pyro meta has evolved is that you don't really use your flamethrower or your degreaser to damage your opponents. You just use the quick switch ability it has to access other weapons that you have quicker and use those to kill enemies instead. So whatever damage reduction or afterburn reduction that the degreaser has doesn't really matter. You just puff a little bit on the enemy to set them on fire, and then switch to your flare gun, your shotgun, your extinguisher, whatever, so that you can finish them off real quickly. And so this update is what I think is Valve's response to those criticisms of the degreaser. They changed it around so the speed of changing weapons is much slower, and the flames of the degreaser itself does as much damage as the default flamethrower. Now, switching from the weapon is only a 30% increase in weapon speed, while switching back to the weapon is an increase in 60%, which is similar to before, and switching your secondary and your melee weapon does not give any increase in speed. So you can tell that Valve really wants you to switch back to the degreaser to your primary weapon as soon as possible. After playing for a while, I realized that I have to adapt by using and relying on my degreaser a lot more than switching to the other weapons to finish the opponents off. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Now when I switch from my primary to another weapon, I have to really make sure that that weapon hits. I cannot just air blast a person to the wall, switch to my secondary, then miss a bunch, and then switch back to my primary real quick and air blast to the wall again until I can actually hit them. Right now, I have to take the one chance that I have to switch to my secondary and make sure that it counts. And I believe that that's a good thing. I believe that it's still enabling a fast weapon switch to an extent can help Pyros use their different weapons more and potentially increase their damage output in different cases. But at the same time, you cannot spam air blast anymore because of the nerf, so that you actually have to make your shots much more accurate than you needed to before. I do feel like that I was killing fewer people than before the update, but that's mainly because I was missing my shots or maybe missing my flares and get killed as a result. I don't feel like that killing a person successfully actually takes longer per se, because of the increased damage of the flamethrower itself. Killing an enemy takes just about as long as it would usually do before the update. It only felt kind of slow because I wasn't used to the sluggish animations that the degreaser weapon switches now have. So basically now, if you compare the degreaser and the default flamethrower, they both do the same damage, which means that in a scenario where you set someone on fire, you have two choices. You can either keep pressing W plus M1 and keep setting them on fire, or you could use your abilities to quick switch to other weapons and use those to finish them off maybe slightly quicker. I believe that essentially this quick degreaser still kills quicker than a default flamethrower can in a lot of situations, but now it takes a lot more precision to pull that off, which means the skill ceiling is higher to use the degreaser, and that's never a bad thing, especially when it gets higher returns than the easier solution, which is default flamethrower. And the air blast itself has the changes on the air blast were quite interesting as well, and I don't mind either of them. Firstly, the nerf with the air blast, where you cannot keep juggling a person over and over again, is totally fair. I've been on both sides of the situation, and I think it doesn't really give Pyro a good name as a result. Just use your one juggle that you have before they can air strafe, and of course, like I said, make that shot count, whatever you need to do. And the 20 health that they give back to Pyro when you extinguish a teammate is also nice, because now teammates might actually help you and extinguish you in pubs. Before this patch, extinguishing teammates is kind of a thankless job. You just extinguish them, they don't even know what's going on, the health stops decreasing, but they don't actually know who helped them and just walk away. Now, it's pretty much still a thankless, sure, but I don't care. I get 20 health out of it. I help myself in this case. So, as a result, I think that this would, I guess, bring more awareness of the ability to extinguish teammates, and I guess it helps both. I guess it helps people up in pubs in general. There are two weapon changes, however, that I cannot agree on. First one is the extinguisher. The extinguisher is originally designed to be a combo tool. You set someone on fire, and then you can switch it quickly with the degreaser, and then attack people with a critical hit and kill them off. Right now, it still does critical hit against burning targets, but the problem is it has a much slower attack speed, and it also has a much slower switch to speed. It is 75% slower. That is an atrocious switching speed. The fact that it swings much slower, and that it does less damage, and that it switches to the weapon much slower, destroys the whole concept of it being a combo tool. There's no reason for me to switch to extinguisher now when I can actually use the degreaser or the flamethrower itself and continue burning the enemy and actually get a higher damage output out of it as a result. There's simply no reason to switch to extinguisher right now, and essentially it is absolutely rubbish right now, and Valve needs to fix that. Secondly, on the other end of the spectrum, we have the Phlogistinator, which got its 10% damage penalty removed so that it does as much damage as the flamethrower, but when you activate your charge, it also gives you complete immunity and knockback immunity as well. Now, the knockback immunity I agree with, because I think it's just absolutely stupid that some Pyros try to knock them out of their charge taunts and prematurely activate their crits so that people can't run away as quickly. But the fact that you're completely invulnerable during the taunt is absolutely silly. I think the playstyle itself is already very unpopular, and the fact that you make it even more powerful is not going to help the situation. I don't care that you don't have an air blast as a result, it is still a very frustrating playstyle for both sides to play. So overall, do I think the Pyro got a nerf or a buff? I think that if we're talking about the degreaser as its primary weapon still, it is, in a sense, a nerf, but only in the sense that it requires a higher skill ceiling to pull off similar stunts that we are used to in the past. We cannot spam air blast anymore to ensure a kill. We have to make our shots count, we have to be more accurate. Killing an enemy basically takes around the same time. So this nerf, it's slight, it's not as bad as a lot of people say it is, but at the same time I think it's going to encourage Pyros to adapt, and I look forward to the meta evolving from this. Oh, and look, now the demo man can extinguish himself immediately by just charging, using his shield. Now that's just ridiculous. How could they implement something that lets you just right click and get rid of everything that the enemy has done to you? That is just absurd. That is... Oh. Oh. Okay.